Well, it's another absolutely drop-dead gorgeous day in the middle of winter, central New York. Well, beginning to get the spring. You know, it's early February. Well, no, it's early March, and you can see how much snow we have. Bob's coming up. We're going to do a little bit of work. You know, I think we're going to do a little bit different theme on this video, because if you spend your time online, the focus is always about the pro saw and the hopped up saw and the bling saw and the get together and this and everything else, how fast it goes and how much compression it has, and is it a pro saw versus a clam shell, all that crap. Well, you know, it kind of dawned on us that you step back a little bit and look at the saw world. Probably 90% of the work out there done by the average person, not the pro, is done with a, you know, 50, 60 cc, sometimes even 40 cc clamshell saw.
Yeah, little snow showers between deposit and Roscoe. Not really much going on.
Here's my wood contribution. Here. I'm not sure how this is going to play, but I don't know if this goes into the category of stupid crap you do. And we have Victory at Coffee here. It's percolating. That was perking quicker.
Well, they're cooking.
Yeah. Got to get this stuff out of the field before, you know, we get the hay bines up here. Got a bunch of them to clean up actually here, if you think about it. Yeah, there's Bob. He found himself a tree to work on. We kind of were looking at the saws we all selected and realized that we pretty much had the history of the 60cc class saws right here in front of us. So I figured it might make some sense. Bob was thinking it might make some sense to go back and review just a little bit of those saws before we get to work.
Yeah, today's going to be more of a work day. We're going to give all the performance stuff a rest. And I mean, that stuff's fun, you know, but you know, how many hot rodded 372s is going to start getting boring. But just to change the pace a little bit.
Well, I had to bring the best firewood saw on the planet, so that was where we started from. Because the kind of work we're going to do on the day is, you know, it's farm work, but it's also typical of what most people do. We got to clean up some wood around the farm, around the hedgerows. 20-inch minus, is that about right?
Yeah.
You know, clean it up, cut it up, block it up. It started out with Bob saying, you know something, it's always a pain in the neck trying to find firewood around the sugar shack. So let's bring a couple of truckloads down to the sugar shack. So we figured, okay, let's do that.
Yeah, for the tons and tons and tons of wood that we cut up here together when we get the other guys up here, every time we come up in the morning, today I was the same thing in language I can't put on the video, but I'm dealing with snow-covered frozen wood because we never take the time to put in a good supply of wood in that sugar shack so we can just come up and get the fire going.
This is what your daddy used.
58 cc's.
Well, yeah.
Well, that's actually 56.
If he had money, he used this. And I think Bob has pointed out several times in some of our prior videos that a lot of the features common to the new saws actually had their roots in Sweden. And this is a John Shred 621. It actually had anti-vibe. The layout of the saw is modern with a vertical cylinder and just the way it's structured. And if you didn't have money, like the rest of us, you had one of these, which was pretty much the dominant American saw of that era, the 70s. So this is the roots.
Yeah, might as well, because here again, by accident, we ended up with
Not planned.
no,
Total
we got
random.
the three generations of mid-size Husky chassis, Husky John Zura chassis. And, you know, at least the last three. I'm not saying this is all that there ever was. This one is a 257. A couple oddball things about this. It doesn't have a 257 piston and cylinder on it. It's got an aftermarket 262 piston and cylinder. And as everybody who's watched any of this silliness knows, I'm not a big fan of aftermarket jugs, but the reality is you cannot get the OEM jug for the 257 or the 262. So you guys that are looking for options to keep these saws going, you know, it's going to have to be an aftermarket option. This particular kit, and it's a good one, is it came in a Mako box, but it was built by it's a Star kit. You know, I got this like a year and a half ago. If you ordered another thing, you know, would it, the same kit be in that same box? Who knows? But this kit, if you could find the Star kit, it actually works pretty good. Probably got about 5 or 6 tanks on it.
That's a good running saw.
And I looked inside, you know, there's no flaking of the chrome or everything. It's actually in pretty good shape. The other thing about this saw, this one's actually handicapped just a little bit. It's got a loop of aftermarket chain on it. And this is happens to be Forester chain. And Walt and I have messed around with some of these, and there was an earlier video where you did a comparison out of the box time cuts from a loop of this versus a loop of Oregon. And the Forester was quite a ways behind. Now you can touch these up, but that's out of the box sharpness. Now I've touched this up pretty good with a file. I just made a couple cuts, and it's cutting really good. So my verdict on aftermarket chains is you're only saving like $2. It's not worth it.
It's not worth it.
The next generation up, you went from the 2 Series to the 3 Series, and this this ugly duckling here is mostly a John Zura 2156, which is the red version of the 357. We haven't said too much about this chassis because it kind of gets lost. It's all been about, you know, the 70 cc's and the hot 50 cc's, and,
Yeah.
and it's just, you know, kind of haven't been. Then the 562 and that wonderful 555 come out, and it's kind of been overlooked. But anyway, this was, a guy tossed this, either he tossed it or dropped it out of a bucket. Never really wanted to admit it. So you see there's an orange side cover. If you look close, I don't know if it'll show up from there, but the crankcase is half orange and half red. So this is really an ugly duckling. And it's been tweaked a little bit, but I actually really, this saw's running really good.
Has for a long time.
Yeah, as a general purpose saw, this thing is just great. I would say it's the best firewood saw here. Wouldn't you agree?
No.
And the other thing to point out too is that as you go from the 200 series to the 300 series, is when we start making the transition from the rubber mounts in most saws to these spring mounts.
The anti-vibes.
Yeah, and the anti-vibe, a huge, huge improvement to go from that 257 to this. It's gigantic. And it's that same level of improvement again when you go from this to the 555, because there's just about no vibration in the 555.
But then it goes backwards when you go to the 562.
Yeah, maybe a little bit, maybe a little bit. So I'm going to have to, the next one up is the 555 series. I really have to let Walter explain this because he's in love with this saw, and I won't do it justice in his book, so he's got to do the talking on that one.
The only thing I have to say is just one thing. It's really simple. This is the best firewood saw you can buy in my mind. Bang for buck. You know, it's the same basic chassis as the vaulted 562. I mean, there's some differences. It has a different crank because it doesn't have stuffers, and has a different carburetor and ignition because it's tuned around that different crank, different plastic, but it's several $100s less. It weighs less.
Than what?
Than a 562.
It's $100 less.
Okay, it's $100 less. Got to get that right. But it's lighter because it has a small mount versus the large mount. It's cheaper and it doesn't have a whole lot less power. And this with an 18-inch bar, in my humble opinion, for the kind of money they cost, is probably the best firewood combination a person can buy. That with the 2258 is the counterpart. This one here, its history is I got it from Bob, and it replaced my 455 Rancher. So I know he's itching to say something. So
I really am. You know, but I'm struggling not to agree with you because just about everything you're saying is right. But because we've been bickering on this for a couple of years now, I just don't want to admit that most of what you're saying is correct. But actually, it's true. You know, bang for the buck. This is really, it's really a good saw. And you know, for people that got a lot of work to do, people come in. A lot of times, they come in a store and like, you know, I'm not no professional, and that's their way of saying I don't want to spend a lot of money.
Yeah.
And you don't really have to. This is really a mid-price saw. You know, people that are buying the Ranchers, you're only going to, you know, for another $100 you could get this, and it's, you know, it's a pro saw. One of the problems with all the Huskies is that, you know, they use that XP designation on a lot of the saws, and it's just a marketing term. There are some differences in them, but it's actually worked too good because so many people dismiss this.
Yeah.
They'll dismiss the 545. They'll dismiss the 365. Same thing that happened with the 257 when it was out. It's like, well, it's, you know, it doesn't have XP on it. It's not one of the good ones. Well, you know, Husky has a pretty good way of covering that middle ground market. They got the plastic clamshell homeowner saws like everybody else. They got the pro stuff, but the stuff in the middle, I mean, these are really, really good buys.
Well, and Husky, you know, as compared to some of the other major brands, which I will not name here, they take the pro saws and have a little bit less bling in terms of plastic and maybe some less tune. They don't have the rev boost feature and, you know, stuff like that. But basically, the layout and the design of this saw is a professional level saw. Magnesium cases. It's really quite a lot of saw for the money. Other brands, what they do is they take a clamshell type design and they add more displacement. They call it their mid-range saw. So to those people who are interested in put weight in the actual architecture and design of a saw, Husqvarna has kind of done something unique in the business, both with the 365 and the 555, where they took the pro level saw and they pulled it back into that lower price range.
Yeah, let's talk about the little ones now.
All right.
Yeah, you know, we knew we were going to do hedgerow work today, and you know, we each like to pick something small. And Walt's going to pick that 543, which we talked about a little bit before, and he'll talk about it again, but I wanted to pick something really different. And this is kind of an odd duck. Yeah, I think we've seen enough, you know, 550s and 346s and all kinds of 350s. So this is a Husky 45, and it looks a lot different because the origin is from another company. You know, we talked a little about the other video when Jason had his partner up here, but this saw really is a partner that's been relabeled because Husky bought Partner. This chassis started out as the Partner P400. There's three displacement sizes in this family of saws. There's the 40, the 45, and the 49 in the Husky range, and there was a corresponding Johnsrud model for each one of those. There's the 2041, the 2045, and the 2050. And this is one of the later ones because Husky back in the early mid-90s, late 80s into the mid-90s, a lot of the consumer Huskies had the gray tops. Now consumer Husky back then means a lot different than it does now. But most of that business, was going to the 50, the 51, and the 55, which are the most common, which you see out there. But these, here again, Partner actually did a lot of innovations. A couple things that you'll start to see on here. Now this is from 96, that 257 is from 95, so they're built about the same time. And you start to see some of the stuff on here that you see on the modern saws now. Partner always had this deal where the back handle and the front handle were connected. But most Huskies back then, with the exception of the 262, all had the hard rubber mounts. I mean, you're talking your 268s, 272s, 266. The 288s, you could get the rubber mounts or the spring mounts. But this was the first saw that had really pretty much the three spring idea. You had one in the back here. You got the one up on the cylinder, which you see on almost every saw nowadays. And then you have one up front, down below here. But this thing, it moves around a little bit. It's really pretty much as smooth as today's stuff.
Yeah.
So anti-vibe-wise, this thing was way ahead. And like I said, that basic layout is pretty common almost everything right now today. The other thing that you get on this saw, which is kind of different from back then, is you have the throttle cable, which is similar to, now the way it was routed was god awful. It comes down and goes up through the handle, and down around under the log and over the truck. But yeah, it's not the easiest thing to work on. These saws it's a clamshell design. It's a plastic case, but they're really, really reliable. Kind of quiet. You know, this one's all stock. Didn't monkey around with the muffler, but I wanted something a little bit different, and this saw does tell a little bit different story. And it's actually a pretty nice saw to run. 45 cc, so this is my little lemon saw today, just something different, something to talk about.
Tell them about that one, the history of the 543.
Yeah, it's like the Husky that really isn't. You know, that at least, you know, as a partner, it was, at least it was, you know, designed and built in Sweden. This is really, this little 543 is actually a Red Max that Husky makes in their colors. It's an XP saw. It's supposed to be the successor, finally, to the old 242 XP. It kind of hits that mark on everything except the actual power. It really won't keep up with a 242, and more like a 42 special. It is a little bit lighter, it's smoother, real easy to start. Be interesting, you know, not that we want to get that stopwatch thing going, but interesting to compare this and that. Because you're looking at 43 cc's versus 45, but those saws actually run good. You won't see too many of those saws out there, but if you do, you're going to get them pretty cheap.
Yeah. Well, this saw here actually spends a fair amount of time doing carpentry. This belongs to my bride, and all that dust probably came from treated 2x6s and 2x8s. I use it for lemon. I adopted her 440E, and when she's not really paying attention, I grab that one for the small work. It's a nice running saw. It may not have the power of that 42. That's true, but it's lighter, doesn't vibrate as much, starts really easy, and it's actually quite a nice saw to run. I mean, there's times you don't need the power, and that's another whole discussion. I mean, all these saws right here will do an awful lot of work, and I know the focus online is, and the focus on a lot of the videos is trying to figure out how to make them run faster with compression and this and that and porting and all that stuff. Fact of the matter is, I would suggest to you that 90% of the work done with chainsaws is done with a standard saw without any modifications whatsoever, and they cut just fine. Thank you very much.
Yeah, we're going to get all the work done that we want to get done today without having, you know, hot rod saws and
Well, we don't really.
200-pound compression. It's got to be fun. We have fun with that. We're not like shooting that down. We're just saying there's something else, and this is kind of what most people do. So the summary is just general purpose mid-size saws, you know, for the average guy, and that's kind of what we got. It's amazing how they all kind of were about the same size going back that many years.
That 621, I'll tell you what, that thing must have been way ahead of its time. Well, it is. It was way ahead of its time. That was quite the saw in its day. I'm going to put a little blurb. You know, people always ask about oil. And I run 32 to 1. Some people run 40 to 1. The dealers recommend 50 to 1.
I don't.
Okay.
I recommend 40 to 1.
But I run 32 to 1. And this goes back in history. I'm not going to go through a big technical discussion.
Well, the dirty little secret behind 50 to 1, the clean little secret, is that one of the reasons that's that required is not necessarily because it's best for the saw, but because it's best for passing the EPA emissions tests.
Well, now that you said that.
So that's, you know, but of course, you know, people can mix it to their own.
So I'm recommending 32 to 1. Bob's recommending 40 to 1. Both of us recommend more than 50 to 1. You know, a little history is back when the first synthetics came out, they didn't burn quite as clean as the other two-stroke oils in the marketplace. So one of the things that was recommended was, especially when you got into the motorcycle world where they had power valves and the like, is they didn't want that gum, so they went a little leaner on the oil, 50 to 1, to get a cleaner burn, so you didn't have as much deposits in the exhaust. The newer synthetics like this Husqvarna, that burns clean. I run 32 to 1 and you don't see deposits. It has a much more complete burn. So that's why I do it. Lubricity, more energy, and just a little bit of feel good, because over the last, well, since the early 70s, God, that's a long time. We're talking 40 years. I've seen the tangible benefits to having more oil in the mix. So flame away, guys will complain about it, but just what I do, and I figure I might as well articulate what I do and why. Again, part of it's scientific, but a lot of it's just empirical data. Last saw is a prettified or cosmetically enhanced 562. I don't know how much time we're going to see that one today, but this one, Bob was kind enough to bring up a tech light bar, so it got that, and it got a shiny new cover. So I figure that's worth a picture, don't you think? And that would be the pinnacle of the 60cc saw technology that's available today.
It is, and there are other competitors that struggle to get their 60cc saw to compare to this favorably.
Well, these guys,
sometimes, you know, even redesigns don't quite hit the mark.
yeah. Well, these have, a little blurb.
It's gone through a lot of changes, though.
Yeah, the
Updates.
562 has gone through a lot of changes, and there's two ways to look at this. And Bob might cringe when I say this. The one way is the guy who's the glass half empty type. Oh my God, it was a terrible design. They had to make changes. And the other way is how I tend to look at it, because I'm trying to think in my past with the motorcycles, what company didn't improve the breed? And Husqvarna took that basic layout and design, and they've engineered it to a better state. And they are so much further ahead in building these style saws, this design saw, than anybody out there, period. And any other manufacturer who has to get into this technology, the X-Torque technology, is going to have to go through a similar learning curve. So, not to plug Husqvarna John Fred, but I kind of am, because it's more of an action speaks louder than words kind of an argument. They brought it to the marketplace. They've evolved it to the point where the latest and greatest versions of this saw that are on the marketplace are significantly better than the first ones. And I would submit are probably better than anything else in that class on the marketplace.
I'm going to differ with that a little bit.
Okay.
But both, yeah, as it is now, finally, it is clearly ahead of other saws in its class. But some of those early changes, they had to be made, because some of the things like the case bolts, some of the coils they had to get from a different vendor. They had to redesign the air filter holder so it would seal better. So some of those early changes, really, they needed to be made, because in those instances, I don't think the saw was quite as ready for the market as they should have been.
But the point is they
did it. Wait a minute. Yeah, they did it, because they had to fix those. But after the actual critical stuff has been done, then I agree with what you're saying, because at that point it's been continuous improvement. But the early stuff, they weren't just making it better, they were fixing problems. And you got to admit, they had some issues when that thing came out.
Well, that's possible. I mean, I'll go there. And I guess my point it still is, I'm trying to think of a new technology that's hit the marketplace that didn't have teething problems. Because you think about this, and this goes back to like software coding. This is another world of mine. And you come up with a good idea, and you have a series of engineers. They put something on paper, and they try to anticipate all the things you're going to see in the field. They take their new concept, I don't care if it's a piece of code, doing graphics, or it's a chainsaw cutting wood, and they put it through their own testing program and do a proof of concept, and then a product definition, then a product concept, and a proof of the concept of the product, where they go test it and test and test it as best they can. Well, Husqvarna, I know they had that saw.
Here, put your favorite one up, your favorite version of it.
I know they had this saw out for testing, because I think I remember seeing one.
Yeah, I had one.
And I think it fell out of a tree and still cut.
60 feet.
So
Drop.
the point is that Husqvarna did the due diligence in the beginning of the design. And the best of the engineers, I don't care what business you're in, can never anticipate what happens when you put a new technology in the hands of just the general public. The special conditions and the stuff that they're going to put that product through, it's very hard to anticipate up front. I don't care who you are.
The other thing that's got to be added to that, all right, is the, the 262, which was on this chassis and part of this family. What people don't remember is how many service bulletins there were in that thing. Now, if you go in, I don't think they're all available, to the public, but if I go in and I click on service bulletins 262, you can't even fit them all on the screen. I mean, there's a lot of them. So people tend to think that, because it's been 15, 16 years since they made that saw, people think, it's 262s are great. And they are, it's a good saw. I think it's a little overrated. I mean, it's really good, but it's not, to be bowed down to. But people don't remember that.
Like this one here.
Yeah, oh God. I'm going to put the earplugs in. Yeah, but people don't remember that, a lot of those saws had a stupid amount of things that had to be corrected or improved. It's not always a correction, it's an improvement sometimes.
And I guess that's my point. I guess a long-winded way of saying it is what I did. But the 562 and the other saws in that class from Husqvarna have gone through that development. And I guess my point is when you go out looking at saws to buy, every company that has to ingest that technology for emissions is also going to have to go through a similar and sometimes painful product evolution and growth and redesign and cycle it through till it gets to a level of maturity that the Husqvarnas are right now. I don't care who they are. They're all going to go through it. Dispute that. Okay. That's my point.
Once again, I'm forced to agree with you. It's just painful as it is.
Painful as it is. But it's just, look, it's just,
let's do some work.
yeah, it's just people.
We're supposed to, you know what? We say we want to give the performance a rest. We need to give our mouths a rest.
There you go.
Do some work.
Time to do the work.
Like the 45 was struggling, but I didn't know if it's going through this.
Yeah.
I thought I had just a regular log. I'm like, what?
Well, what
Where's
you were
it going?
saying,
You can't even see it.
there's a point where it doesn't make sense anymore. You got to go to a bigger saw.
Because on my truck, the water that came, that's dripping down from the drive up the hill,
Freezing.
is forming icicles.
Well, it is Central New York. I want to point out that I don't think you can go that fast with a splitter.
No, probably not. Somebody's probably going to tell us we're not doing this right, but...
Oh, there's always someone telling us something. Well, there's the end game for 90% of the people out there. That's a couple rows, it's not a full bed. But we have another pickup truck here to fill up. So, typical day in the woods. Because this thing has a habit of running out of battery, I'm going to leave it plugged into the truck and do this next round of cutting while the truck is idling. That's the noise you're going to hear. So we started looking at some of the jobs that we have upcoming and walked down there a ways, and I think the net is we could probably cut for a month and never get to the end of this hedgerow every day. No ending of jobs. But I think the point that kind of like to make is what we did just today here, taking a couple of pickup trucks, a couple of saws, and going to a hedgerow or a woodlot or looking for tops from a, you know, the results of a logging operation, or even in your backyard you pick down a tree, is very, very typical of what most people do with a chainsaw. And I don't think anything I did today would have been done better with a 372 or a 390 or a pro level steel, any of those things. Because basically what happens in this kind of operation is you cut some, you talk some.
Yeah, we did a lot of talking.
You know, you have a drink of water, and then you move the wood. And if you were to start taking into account the amount of time spent on handling the wood, well, that's probably 50% of the time right there. Just taking the wood you've cut and putting it into the back of the pickup truck and carrying it somewhere and taking it back out again. So the saw time is actually pretty small.
Yeah, it's not even close to 50% because you cut it up pretty quick. A lot of that had to be split, you know. Then you have to load it in the truck. Then we got to go down the sugar shack and unload it and stack it. So the amount of the time and the whole firewood process, the saw is really kind of a minor player in that. So
Yeah.
a few seconds or a couple seconds on cut time doesn't really affect the job. It can be a little more fun with a hot rod saw.
Well, round two for food, those are brats. Coffee's hot, that fire is perfect.
Yeah, the reheated coffee isn't bad either.
No, that's all you need. That's my point.
Well, I don't disagree with that at all. But we're separating, you know, it's a frame of mind. What do we want to do today? Sometimes it's about the performance, and we enjoy, and we'll continue to enjoy the modded saws.
Yeah.
And then today was like, well, let's not talk about performance, let's talk about the job. And you know, we didn't tackle anything, you know, even remotely big today. the biggest piece of wood we cut was maybe 12 inches in diameter. So what we had was totally adequate for what we did.